All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we're going to talk about the Eagles and the Texans. We'll talk about the moves that they've made so far in the offseason. We'll start off with the Eagles. So they made a couple of more signings yesterday. So they actually brought back C.J. Gardner-Johnson. They signed him to a 3-year deal worth up to $33 million. He had a great season for them in 2022, tying for a league high 6 interceptions despite missing 5 games due to injury. So, and what was the issue with the Eagles last year? Was their defense. And what they've been able to do, you re-sign Brandon Graham. Obviously, Fletcher Cox retiring does hurt, but you bring back C.J. Gardner-Johnson. You bring in Bryce Huff from the Jets. You sign him to a 3-year contract, $51.1 million, 10 sacks with the Jets in 2023. I mean, they're doing what they can to try to improve this defense. So I've liked what they've been able to do. Also, the fact that they got Saquon Barkley as well. I know people will talk about how it was definitely an overpay, especially with the running back position. But listen, you bring in Saquon Barkley. I think obviously he's an instant upgrade over what they've had. I mean, 2022 they had Miles Sanders and Boston Scott. They still got Kenneth Gainwell. And then, of course, I think he's an upgrade over DeAndre Swift. But even though Swift had a good year, but now he's just got to go out there and prove it. I mean, this is a guy that's dealt with injuries, and that's something that can definitely happen. Injuries always happen, unfortunately, and I don't want to see injuries, continue to occur. But that's football; it's going to happen. So, but listen, I know being a Giant fan, it hurts that it stings that he went to the Eagles, but you know what? It's a much better situation than with the Giants. And again, I think the Giants did the right thing, and I like the moves that the Giants made too. But also another move that they made as well, the Eagles signed Devontae Parker to a 1-year contract. I want to see if the specifics of the deal. So 1 year, $4.69 million. So he's kind of going to be brought in to be like that third wide receiver, which I don't think is a bad move. He's kind of going to step in and take over, that Julio Jones, Quez Watkins role. I mean, the Eagles have a ton of weapons, and especially like bringing in Barkley now. You have A.J. Brown, you got Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, Saquon coming out of the backfield. I think Devontae Parker being a number 3 wide receiver, again, it adds depth, and he could still make plays here and there. Again, I mean, back when he was with the Dolphins, you thought, hey, this is going to be the next, really good receiver, but that really didn't turn out to be the case. At least when he was with the Dolphins, he was good, but at least for 1 year he was good. But then he spent some time with the Patriots and now with the Eagles. I mean, again, I think him being that number 3 wide receiver, I don't think that was a bad move either. So yeah, I mean, I've liked what the Eagles have been able to do. Again, ultimately, it's going to come down to Jalen Hurts stepping up, and not turning the ball over as much as he did. The defense has to improve, and I think they've been able to do that. So we'll see how this all translates. Again, you got new coordinators, you got Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio. So I think the Eagles are going to be good again next year. I don't think we're going to see a late season collapse. They have a ton of talent on this team, so it's really hard to see them, coming out flat and just not having a good year next year. I think they are going to be back to being that team. I don't know if they're going to be as good as they were in 2022, but I think they're going to be back to being, a good team. And again, it's going to come down to them in Dallas for the division, in my opinion. So, but yeah, those are all the Eagles moves. Then I also wanted to talk about the Texans because they made a lot of signings on defense. So one of the signings that I failed to mention was they signed Denico Autry over from the Titans. So he agreed to a 2-year deal, $20 million, guy they added to their defensive line. He had a career high in sacks in 2023 with 11 and a half, again, with the Titans. Yeah, I mean, he's 34 years old, but, listen, 11 and a half sacks is not too shabby. And again, this is coming off of them losing Jonathan Grenier to the Vikings. So they bring him in. They also brought in Azeez Al-Shaair from the 49ers. So he reunites with the D'Amico Ryans. Linebacker, he signed a 3-year deal, $34 million. So they bring him in. And then they also brought in Danielle Hunter as well from the Vikings. The Vikings, they replaced him with, Grenier. They brought in Van Ginkel. So now he goes to the Texans. So the Texans have really revamped their defense. Because, again, a lot of guys, were going to be free agents. So you pair him with Will Anderson Jr., who had a great rookie season. So, I like the moves they made, strengthen the defense. And then another thing they did was, they also, brought back guys like Dalton Schultz and Kymie Fairbairn, which I talked about. They also did bring back Noah Brown, who actually had a good year for them as well. They brought him back on a 1-year deal. Again, he's a number 3 wide receiver, just like Devontae Parker. But, when guys got hurt, he stepped up. And he was making plays. So hopefully, for them, you get Tank Dell back healthy. Nico Collins had a good season. Of course, and, you have C.J. Stroud, a quarterback, who was great. So, bringing back Noah Brown, I think, was good. Listen, I like the direction the Texans are going in. I really do. And especially, revamping their defense, especially on the defensive line. I think that they are. Listen, they're going to be a force in 2024. They're going to be a team that gives other teams problems, and they're going to be facing the best of the best. They're going to be facing the Bills. They're going to be facing the Ravens again. They're going to be facing the Chiefs. So we'll see how it goes. Listen, they already beat Joe Burrow and the Bengals in Cincinnati. Now, again, they played the Ravens, and it didn't go so well both times. But, again, next year's a new year. So, I'm curious to see how C.J. Stroud does, against all these teams, and the Bills too, like I mentioned. But again, he's beaten Joe Burrow, So, now we'll see, him go up against Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. I'm excited to see that. I'm guessing those games are going to be, 4:25 or, maybe prime time. So, looking forward to see, C.J. Stroud and what he can do against those quarterbacks. So, but yeah, the Eagles and the Texans, I definitely like what they've been able to do. Again, with the Eagles, defense was a problem last year, and they were able to add some guys. We'll see, C.J. Gardner-Johnson coming back into the fold. Are the Eagles going to be able to recapture that 2022 magic on defense? We'll see. Again, Vic Fangio is the defensive coordinator now. I know, listen, James Bradbury had a rough year, in the secondary. So I don't know what's going to happen with him. Darius Slay, of course, I talked about him being a possible trade candidate. So we'll see. But, again, he added Bryce Huff from the Jets. I like what they were able to do. And then, again, on the offensive side of the ball, obviously they re-signed one of their offensive linemen. You bring in Saquon Barkley. It's hard to imagine the Eagles are just going to, that second half collapse is going to carry into next year. But who knows? Who knows? We'll see, because a lot of stuff, came out with Nick Sirianni and, Hurts turning the ball over more. So we'll see how that all goes. But I like what they've been able to do. And again, we'll see what they do with the draft. We still got the draft coming up, So you have that. And then, of course, the Texans, again, I like what they've been able to do defensively, strengthening the defense. And, again, bringing in Joe Mixon. We'll see how that, I think that'll help out the running game. But I feel like you're going to kind of get the same, similar production like you did with Devin Singletary. Mixon will be good, but I don't think, he's going to be like, how he was the first couple of years with the Bengals. So, but again, I like what these two teams have been able to do. And, for the Texans, we'll see if they can repeat as AFC South champs, even though the division is going to be competitive. You have the Colts and the Jags, to deal with. And then, of course, with the Eagles, again, for me, your competition is Dallas. And, Dallas could have very easily won both games. So, again, like what they've been able to do. So, other moves I wanted to touch upon as well. The Dolphins, they signed Jordan Poyer to a one-year contract. So they bring him in. I know the Dolphins, they released a lot of guys on defense, so they bring in Poyer. The Saints actually made a move. They signed Chiefs linebacker Willie Gay to a one-year contract. The Giants, speaking of quarterbacks, they signed Drew Lock to a one-year, $5 million contract, bring him in as a backup. Listen, won that game against the Eagles. Speaking of the Eagles, I think he's a decent backup. You also had Mariota signing a one-year contract with the Commanders. So again, we'll see what the Commanders end up doing on draft night. So they signed him. Jameis Winston signed with the Cleveland Browns, $8.7 million contract. That was on a one-year deal. This move I forgot to mention. So the Rams, they signed Darius Williams to a 3-year contract. He was previously with the Rams, then he was with the Jaguars. So the Rams bring him back. Also, the Seahawks, they re-signed Leonard Williams to a 3-year contract, former Giant. Dolphins also signed Jordan Brooks from Seattle, a linebacker, to a 3-year, $30 million deal. So, so those are some of the other moves that have been made over the past, couple days, or some of the days that some of them I missed. But, yeah, I mean, because there's been so much happening. But, so before we go to break, I just want to remind you guys again to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to go to the following link. That is GSMCPodcast.net. Again, that really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Again, that is GSMCPodcast.net. And as always, it is displayed on the ticker on the bottom of the show segment down below. So when we come back from our second break of the show, we'll touch upon some wide receiver news, Deontay Johnson being traded from the Steelers to the Carolina Panthers. We'll also talk about Darnell Mooney signing with the Falcons, teaming up with Kirk Cousins, a former NFC North foe. So we'll get into all that when we come back, because I know there really hasn't been a lot of wide receiver stuff. I mean, I know I talked about Michael Pittman getting a new deal and T. Higgins requesting a trade. Gabe Davis signed with the Jags, but there really hasn't been a lot. But we'll talk about these two moves here when we come back from our second break of the show. So with that being said, stick around and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.